Like if you so my dad watched Pushpa like 6 times. He just watched it this morning
Six
too.
times?
My
Oh my
dad loved it. So like every time we watch the movie or like hear the dialogues, like we'll all start talking like this chittur yasa from like it's very close and very similar to the Nellore yasa too. So I guess that's one thing, but yeah, it just happens. It's like an automatic switch that you can try to if you work on it, you can try to like uh manually switch, but a lot of times it just happens automatically.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Telugu Saga. Thank you guys so much for pouring love all over the world. We're excited to have you on the next episode. New generations and their lifestyles are being challenged and improved all the time. We're able to seek opportunities around the world where we feel that the environment is important for our growth. More importantly, we want to focus more on the Telugu diaspora who made the leap to migrate to different areas of the world. We have a special guest here today who would like to share her experience going back to India to study and also Telugu diaspora in the other states. Coming from a tech background, she's a consultant at Deloitte, loves cooking and watching movies. Welcome, Sravya.
Hey guys, hi Sai, hi Vishal. Thank you so
Hey,
much for having me here.
yeah, thank you for joining. Um, and so, like, let's start off with like the main question here. How would you describe your like cultural identity in both the U.S. and India? Like, do you think there was like a drastic difference, or was there was just a slight modification?
I would say it was pretty shocking. So just a little background. My family moved to the States when I was like 3 years old. Lived in Atlanta for a short bit and then lived in the Bay Area for like 12, 13 years. Or 12 years, I think, because I was a pretty like, young, like antsy teenager when I moved back to India, which I don't think is the best space for any sort of life changes for any teenager. So like I think my age itself was a reason for the shock, but also like the culture. So like when I used to live in California, my mom used to make it a point, as did I think so many other like Telugu moms. Like, she made it a point to make sure I was immersed in like Telugu culture and like like Indian culture in general. So literally every single hour of every single weekend was like pre-planned by her. I went to like like Silicon Andhra programs and like Balavikas and Shaka and like literally like you name the program, I've at least been there at least once. So so I was very immersed. I think that's because I think Telugu diaspora, like in the States, I think our parents especially, they miss the culture back home. So they tried their best to replicate it here for us. Um, and when I went back, like we moved to Bangalore and I studied there for a year. My parents, like, I don't know if you guys went through this, like when we used to study in California, they used to be like, if you get bad grades, we're gonna send you to India, we're gonna put you in Narayana, life's gonna change for you. And like that used to be like the biggest scare. And the stories they would tell us would be like, oh, in India, like, boys and girls like don't talk to each other, or like, it's very strict, like you'll get, hit with a stick here, like with a scale or something like that if you make a mistake. Like they painted pictures of like India of being like very rigid and like very still very traditional and cultural and all of that stuff, right? So like that's the mindset we had when even my parents had when we decided to go back to Bangalore. So we went to Bangalore and I was expecting to like obviously go to this like lame school that like probably didn't even know of like about computers or like that's kind of what was going on in my head. And then so I go to Bangalore and it was like the biggest culture shock that I could even like I could even imagine, right? So it was the exact opposite, right? Like so I moved there for the ninth grade, I think. Um and I just completed middle school in California. You know, we were I don't know, like wild by like normal standards of like middle schoolness, but like it Indian wildness was completely different. Like their standards of everything were so different. It was just, I mean, for example, the very first question I got asked when I moved to India and I went to school was, "How drunk have you ever been?" And I was like, "Bro, I'm like 13 or 14 years old. Like I've never had alcohol before. Like what are you talking about? Like what?" And they'd be like, "Oh, you don't drink? Oh yeah, like we drink here like all the time." And like they would show like their water bottles and be like, "You think this is water? This is vodka?" And I'm like, "You're probably joking, bro. Like, what are you talking about?" And they're like, "You're from America and you're telling us you don't drink. Why are you lying to us?" And so like just things like that, like everything was so different. I think like here, like we're more like disciplined and cultured because our parents, like they used to they kind of all like they know the struggle of being an immigrant, and like they know the value of life and the value of money. So I think that is like taught to us from a very young age. Whereas in India, especially if you go to like an international school or something like that, it's very different. Like the dignity of labor or whatever you call it just doesn't exist in certain communities in India, I think. So, I would hear statements like, um, "Oh, like the teacher only like puts bread on the table because my parents pay fees for the school," or things like that. And it would be like really abnormal to hear things like that. Like we were taught to like respect our teachers, and our parents have I think have always taught us that like in India, like respect is a much bigger deal. So we were like, "Oh, we don't respect our teachers as much as people do in India," but then you go to India and people are like making statements like this. So like for the first year, I was just my everyday was coming back home and be like, "You guys said it was gonna be different. Guess what I have to deal with here?" so so yeah, I think it was. I don't know if that answers your question. And I think a big shock, very big shock culturally.
Yeah, that answers the question. Yeah, just talking about your experience. I know someone who was born in India, came here, finished up until like finished high school, and then they went to India to do their medical. And she talked about how um, just with the professors, it was so different because knowing that she was from America, the first year they used to treat her differently. Maybe even like you could see that small change in like the types of marks and grades that they would get. And so I was actually kind of I had that picture in my head. But do you think like Bangalore was kind of like more of like a mixed culture, or where there's like different types, like different people who spoke different languages that kind of helped make it more progressive that way?
So it's really interesting that you asked that question because what I noticed in Bangalore, and I went to two different schools in Bangalore just because the first school I went to, it was so ratchet. I just couldn't like it was supposedly like an international school, but like people would throw rice balls, like balls. They would take lunch out of their box and throw it at each other and just do things like that. Like there's multiple experiences like that, and I was just like, this ain't no international school. Like, get me out of here. So my parents actually like, took me out of that school and sent me another school. So like I kind of saw like different, like sort of different communities and like different parts in Bangalore, I guess. Um, but the common thing in both schools, they're both like sort of international or like whatever, like high end schools or whatever, is that very, very few people in the classroom, even though they were like from various different backgrounds, like people who migrated from all over the country or even all over the world, because I think Bangalore is like a hot spot for it, like NRA returns or whatever. Barely anybody could speak their like mother tongue or like their language. Like, and they would almost feel ashamed of even acknowledging that they knew what their mother tongue was. Like, and I know that a lot of people even in the States like have probably had that experience where they were a little ashamed of their identity because of their environment. But it was just more ironic because this was India. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense if like, we lived in Kansas and, like, or whatever, like, like, with no other brown people around and being the only brown person, if we felt like awkward to share our identity, I guess that's like understandable. but like literally living in India, people were like almost ashamed to share their identity. So like, and I was always taught to like speak in Telugu. Like my parents will not even to this day respond if I say anything in English. Like if I say even a word in English, my mom even till this day will be like, I don't understand. ఏం మాట్లాడుతున్నావు నాకు అర్థం కావట్లేదు. ఆ ఇంగ్లీష్ ఆపి తెలుగులోకి రా. So it's like, so I was bubbling with Telugu. I was like, if there was one pro to going to India, I was like, I can speak all the Telugu I want, and like like someone will speak it back to me. And Telugu somehow was a much more like secret code language in India than it was in the Bay Area. Like, I mean, like just yesterday, like now I live in Dallas. I was at India Bazaar, and there was this guy behind me in line speaking on the phone in Telugu, and he was like, "Oh, that is balapakura," something, something. Like he was like going off, and I was like, "Bro, do you realize that this is Dallas? You're in India Bazaar. Like 9 out of 10 people here understand Telugu." Whereas in Bangalore, like if you speak in Telugu, people would stare at you. Like I honestly remember I was I felt really out of place. So like it was really hard for me to make friends in India. I found like I remember I had like one girl who was also a little shy, so I would like talk to her, and I was like, I dared ask her the question. I was like, your name sounds Telugu. I mean, obviously, like last names, I think you can identify like Telugu people. Right? I was like, your name sounds Telugu. Do you speak Telugu? And she's like, yes, Telugu మాట్లాడతానండి. I was like, oh my god, నిజంగా మాట్లాడతారా Telugu? And the worst part is, like, nobody was in the classroom. One guy, obviously another Telugu person, because his last name was like Reddy or something, like obvious Telugu person, walks in and he's staring at us. He like legit gave me this look, and I can still remember the look he gave us. And it was just like shock. I think he was shocked that I was openly like I was so open to sharing my identity with somebody else, and like also kind of like I can't some sort of like sympathetic look, like, oh, like you're sharing your identity. Like it was just I still remember it. I can't explain what it was, but it just I that look just gave me this feeling. I was like, I want to go back to California and speak Telugu to normal people like a normal person. Like I don't please get me out of here. So actually so like multiple incidents like that actually triggered my parents to move from Bangalore and move toward like hometown, which is Bangalore. Which was a completely different like environment altogether. So yeah.
So did what your mom say come true, where if you had bad grades, you would go back to India?
Uh, are you asking if I got bad grades in school? I mean, probably I probably wasn't the best kid in school because my parents, they somehow like they differ in the sense from other brown parents that they never like cared as much for grades and academics. For them, it was all about: Are you speaking Telugu? Like, are you thinking in Telugu? Are you dreaming in Telugu? Like, and are you like they valued culture and they still value culture so much more than academics.
We need to meet your parents ASAP.
I don't I don't know if that's for the best or not because I guess a lot of brown children like whether they like it or not like I think the pressure from their parents to perform academically definitely like pushed them or motivated them or somehow forced them to like aim for like really big things in life, right? And I'm not saying I'm disappointed or I regret where I am in my life right now, but I feel like sometimes if I have a bad day and I'm like, what the heck am I doing with my life right now, like career wise, I'll be like, yeah, it's because my parents never cared about my grades. So I guess it goes both ways. So I mean, I had my fair share of like trauma, like brown trauma, because believe it or not, parents who care about culture are a lot more like, serious than like parents who care about grades. Like grades are easily achievable. Culture, like, is there ever gonna be a day when like you don't hear what will people think? People mention like you can never actually like meet the goal with that. Whereas grades, I mean, yeah, like if you work a little hard, you can probably get an A plus. It'd be chill.
That's definitely true. It comes with culture, respect. They go all out. But
Yeah.
I gotta give props to them for actually migrating and surviving in this new places. I'm curious to know the first people that came to America, like the Telugu people that came to America, like there's no other Telugu people. How did they get around? Because in the last 10 years, a lot of us came to US and we were able to help each other out because it's what we do,
Mhm.
right? We can communicate, and we need that like invisible thread to like connect back home, through these culture activities you mentioned. So it's tough, and it's good to know that like there are generations of Indians in South Africa, like Malaysia, like Canada, like we're out there. We're definitely out
Yeah.
there. It's good to notice that.
Yeah, I mean, what you said is very true. I also like always wonder how they like manage to survive. Like the very first Telugu person, like that's it's really amazing how it was because of them that like I guess like all of us are somehow here today. So
I remember my experience just going to India. I mean, I've been there like 3 or 4 times now in the past 20 years. But it's also been 10 years since I've been there. So what I remember is just like when you walk, like just based on like what you wear, and your body language, they can tell you if you're from the US or you're from a
yeah.
foreign place. Um, did that ever happen to you? Like just when going in there, this like they spot you as in, okay, you're definitely not from like here. uh, yeah, you're probably born, but like you weren't really raised around here. And like, how did that kind of affect your friendships? Like, did you actually were you able to make good friends there?
Like so we used to go to India like almost every single year growing up. And then I lived there for 4 years. And then after I came back, like I continued going to India every single year. So the whole like, so I can answer your question in two parts. So I think like first part, like when I lived there in like Bangalore, for high school and stuff, I think in places like Bangalore where it's like much more like metropolitan almost, I think even in Bangalore, right, there are areas, right? Like if you're aware of like Bangalore map, like I guess there's areas of like NRI population. So like if you go there and like you're just like like this, they don't really care much, regardless of whether they're NRI or not. Like everyone there kind of dressed like that. So you don't get as many weird looks. But if you do go like venture off onto like actual areas of Bangalore, or like a little bit more like non NRI populated or non tech areas, well, I was really young then, so like I wouldn't like venture off on my own, and it was mostly with my parents and in a car, and we would just go from destination to destination. So like I can't really answer that as well. Um, but that does like what you did mention, like that you can really see that change like once we moved to Nellore. Like obviously, like even if you wore jeans, like people would definitely know that like you were not from there. But people in Nellore were somehow a lot more accommodating. That I was different. I remember like when I started, like I actually did end up going to Narayana, so for like intermediate, like 11th and 12th. So we had like this one casual like dress day or whatever. And like none of the other girls were allowed to wear jeans, but like my casual dress, like the only like casual clothes I owned then were jeans. So like the principal and everyone was like very accommodating, and they would make it was like a lady I remember, and she as the principal at that time. And I remember she told me, she was like, when you like kids from the US wear jeans or like wear like Western clothes, it doesn't look, you guys are still very considerate of how you look, you know? But like when kids here wear like Western clothes, I guess they're trying to imitate something that is not very natural to them. So it just doesn't like fit for our like cultural scene. And I was like, that's a really interesting comment that somehow makes sense, but I don't want to talk too much about it. It has its like fine lines of like misogyny and patriarchy and all of that mixed into it. But I mean, I guess we have to give it to the reality as well, like the reality of what they've seen in their life, like how dress can affect certain scenarios. So as much as like there are wonderful concepts like fighting the patriarchy or whatever, like I feel like we also have to balance that with reality. So they were accommodating, but at the same time, like they would draw lines where they need to be drawn, I guess. So Well, and then also like after I came back here and I like if I visit now, I've decided that like wearing any sort of jeans in India is an absolute no-go for me. So I literally go like as soon as I go to India, I'll like go to like Reliance or whatever the heck and like buy the most like normal looking kurti, like buy three
RS
pairs,
Brothers.
yeah, or that, and wear like that like my entire trip. Like I will it's really one, it's really hot in India. Like, why do I want to wear jeans in India to begin with? And like, obviously, short clothes in like places like Nellore are out of the question. So I've over time I've just accepted that like cotton kurtis are the way to go, man. Like, let's not attract attention and let's live comfortably. Like, what are we trying to prove? Who are we trying to fight here? So
Yeah, I think what gives away that I'm a NRI when I go to India is that I go to the shops to get something, and when they ask me certain things, I take my time to respond. On the other side, they're like, "Who's this guy?" Internally for me, like I'm trying to translate my mind to
mm,
Telugu, and once it comes out, like I use an accent or use certain words that no one
mm,
nearby uses, and they're like, "Ekkడి నుంచి వచ్చావు?" and they start asking all these questions.
yeah. So
Uh,
I think like living in India for a couple of years like definitely gave me that edge. So like obviously my Telugu got like a lot better and like I've picked up like slangs. So even in English I can do a very Indian slang. It's not like I'm trying to imitate them. It just comes very naturally, I guess, if I speak with other kids who are speaking in that sort of a slang. So now I've learned how to like balance that in my brain. So if I want the other person to question my identity, I will use a certain slang. And sometimes I know that I'm doing it purposefully, but like sometimes if someone speaks to me, like even like my cousins are from like the Kadapa region, right? So if they say something to me in like a Kadapa slang, like 10 minutes later, I'll start speaking in like a Kadapa yasa. And I'm like, I promise I'm not trying to imitate you. It's just coming out like that.
can you say a few words?
No, I can't. I really can't. Like if you my dad watched Pushpa like 6 times. He just watched it this morning
Six
too.
times?
My
Oh my
dad loved it. So like every time we watch the movie or like hear the dialogues, like we'll all start talking like this Chittur Yasa from like it's very close and very similar to the Nellore Yasa too. So I guess that's one thing, but yeah, it just happens. It's like an automatic switch that you can try to if you work on it, you can try to like uh manually switch, but a lot of times it just happens automatically.
All right, I'll say it in English. Can you say in the Chitsura accent?
I can try a Nellore accent.
Nellore accent, yeah.
Okay.
Um, I'm doing a podcast with you guys.
నేను ఈరోజు పాడ్కాస్ట్ చేస్తున్నా.
Oh
Okay,
my God, that's
yeah, it's pretty good.
So okay, so like obviously we're from Nellore, like our whole family, like my mom, dad, everybody, right? So we can't tell, but my cousins over the years have told me that when I speak in a pure Nellore Yasa, apparently we stretch everything. So I guess Rozu is like I guess the stretching part.
so this Yasa, like I heard it's from a little bit from Tirupati, a little bit from. So is it all over or is it a specific area?
Like the Nellore Yasa or like from the movie Pushpa.
Let's go with Pushpa.
So I think Pushpa is like primarily Chittur, but like there's definitely so like Nellore and like Chittur have like some similarity. They're closer than like obviously like Telangana Yasa. So from I guess from that perspective, it's very relatable for us.
Mm.
Like we don't use certain words like they do. Like in Chittur Yasa, they'll say something like "Purchinadu," and we'll be like, "What? Ekkada purchadu?"
To be honest, I don't really know what type of accent I have until like Sai points it out.
Yeah.
So even when I'm like talking with Sai and I say a word, he's like, "Dude, that's Telugu accent, bro." And then like somewhere like I could be talking to my relatives like in India, and they'll like talk to my mom and be like, "Yeah, like he'll switch some words in Telangana, and then there's like Andhra slang." It's like it's all mixed. I don't know.
It's really cool though, isn't it? It's really
um,
fun to listen to.
yeah.
Like for
Uh,
example, sorry to interrupt you. Like, a common word that we both use like Telangana side they say kuso, and Andhra
Mm,
side they say kurcho.
yeah,
Like it's fun to hear other
yeah.
slangs.
It is. And I think even more than with my family, because with my family, like even within the Nellore, right? There's um i- as much as we don't like want to specifically point it out, I guess it is true that like certain communities have like certain different styles of speaking, right? Like so I think with with my parents, it's more like it's a little bit more formal. Like even though it is like Nellore is like funny, it's like a funny formal. Whereas like if I spoke with my friends, like obviously we're way more like it's more diverse. It's like a more diverse group of people, right? So everything mixed is very informal. So like I tell my friends, I call them like my people like friends from Nellore, and I'm like, I make it a point to talk to you guys every 6 months just so like I can remember my yasa. I don't want to recharge my yasa.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, no, it's very interesting to see the different accents that we get just by going to India or just interacting with people.
Right.
But yeah. So switching gears here, Uppadam of the Eye. Could you share how that kind of got started?
Okay, so it's operative of my
My eye. Okay.
no, you're fine. Though, you're fine. It's a really hard name. My brother gives me so. My brother's the one who came up with the name, but it was supposed to be like a play off of apple of my eye, but like Aparam.
Okay.
But then ever since we stuck to the name, he like gives me a lot of shit, and he's like, the name is so hard. That is why you don't have any followers on the page. Because you like, I'll tell people the name, and they're like, "Oh, that's a nice name," and then they'll go home and they'll be like, "Wait, Appa, what? Appadam of what?" Like even my own dad, like he calls it Appadam of I, and I'm like, there's four words. It's not Appadam of I, it's Appadam of my I. We've definitely thought of like changing the name, but like somewhere I just feel like we made a brand out of it, man. I mean, regardless if we have followers or not, it's like a running joke, and I don't know if I'm ready to give that up.
I'm
Sorry, I
curious.
interrupted you. I didn't mean
Now
to.
that you have an Instagram named Appadam. Now I'm curious because I haven't researched this. Was your first video how to make Appadam?
So I think I honestly have never made upperams before. Like I don't even frying them in oil. Like even that, I'm scared of frying things in oil. So yeah, but I do intend to learn how to make upperams like from scratch and make a video on that. That is definitely on the list of things to do.
So how did you get into like the cooking and like where do you come up with these like unique recipes?
Well, I guess the recipes are probably not unique. They're more like a little bit more traditional. It's because my dad so like I said, very cultural family, like very traditional. So we have certain practices where like um really unique practices that like people even in India don't follow anymore. So there would like times throughout the year like my mother would not cook when we were growing up after a particular age. Like after I kind of like grew up and I was like 13, 14, and I was able to do things. My mom was like, "Great, now we're gonna revert back to my lifestyle when I was like in the 80s." So, and she like a few days before she wouldn't cook, so like we had to like cook and make food. So like that's when it started, like especially after we moved to India. My dad used to work in the US still, and then we used to live in India, so like it was sort of on me to like cook. And then slowly, like obviously initially my mom would like help like direct or instruct or do something that she could to help. But then later as I like started picking things up, she would just be like, I cook like 30 days a month. I think you can cook for a couple of days. It's not going to end the world. So that's where it started. um and then I think it just grew from there. I, and the funny thing is I'm actually not a foodie. Like I don't like really enjoy, and I'm very picky, and I don't really enjoy eating a lot of different kind of food. But ever since I started cooking, I really started to appreciate like so many elements of cooking, like hygiene and health and like taste, and and the biggest part is probably like serving. And I think that's also like a very Telugu thing, right? Serving people is like a very big thing for Telugu people, and I think maybe genetics probably played a little part into it because apparently my dad's ancestors were like vanta vallu, like cooking people, so like maybe genetics. And I just continued, and I just really like enjoy cooking a lot. And then obviously, like, when you're 13 or 14 and you're like making food, like even if you just make like carrot kura or something, like, people are like, wow, మీ అమ్మాయి చాలా బాగా వంట చేస్తుందండి, ఎంత అసలు సూపర్ అండి, మీ అమ్మాయి అసలు 14 ఏళ్ళకి వంట సో I think like that sort of pep talk from aunties, I think gave me some sort of a ego boost maybe. So I continued. So various things, I guess.
It actually makes us do more when people appreciate it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah. So I know there, it's we always have this fear of trying new things, whether it be cooking or like forming new habits, right? You're like, it's not gonna happen, or like I'm not fit for it. So
Yeah.
and you have with some guidance, you're able to actually practice every day, right? From that day on.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you start small in cooking and build your way up for all of us who are bachelors and trying to grow in that area?
Uh, I think it's a fair question. I would say like to start with maybe like a simple dish that you really like. Um, so that like I think the interest you have towards the dish might motivate you to start. Um, but if you're gonna take that path, I would suggest having somebody next to you to begin with, because if you ruin your favorite dish, like I don't know if you're ever gonna want to try that again. So that could be a path, or like start with something very simple that you can't really go wrong with. Maybe like uh, any like paneer curry, or like any. I would say that Telugu cooking is a little bit more like difficult than maybe
Complicated.
like it's not if you want to make basic things like what we eat with rice every day, like carrot kura or like beetroot kura or whatever, like that's just like put some tirgamata, put the vegetable and be done with it. But if you want to do anything like pulusu or rasam or sambar charu, whatever, like that's probably not a good like first level. I feel like you can never go wrong with what I like to call orange curry. So, like, paneer butter masala or things like that, you just, whatever you do, it comes out fine. And I think once it comes out good, like, I think that motivates you to keep going and trying. And then one more thing I really like to tell people is try not to like follow recipes like perfectly. Like, really, like, you have to, so like for me, this is something that I found like in my early stages of cooking itself, is that there is never a perfect amount of salt that you can add. Like that's why it always is salt as needed, because like it varies on a lot of things. It varies on like the day and where the tomato came from, or like like the weather, and like so many different factors, like how much water you have that day to drink. So like everything in fact in cooking is like you have to kind of just close your eyes and be like, okay, there is like గిడనిండా కూరుంది, కూర ఇక్కడ వరకు ఉంది, నేను ఇంత ఉప్పేస్తే and then literally you like try to really feel the curry and like feel like whatever you're making, and feel every salt particle touching all the curry pieces, and then go with the flow. I think
I
that's how
really like the
you.
way you said it, like feel. And another common term they use is put love into the cooking, and it turns out really well. Um, and I've I was able to start cooking when I moved at home. I think my first dish was egg curry, like chopped up onions, just
Mm.
egg scrambled, and like upukaram pasfu. That's it. That was my first dish. Do you remember your first dish?
My first dish, I
Going
think
back in time.
I think it was, I remember, I don't know if this was my very first dish. Okay, so like I loved pav bhaji as a child. So I would help my mom make pav bhaji, but that was always under my mom's guidance. But I remember, I think it was in 2011. It was my mom's birthday, and I wanted to like, my dad had taken her out somewhere, and I wanted to do something like, like do something special. So, uh, I think gifts. rasmalai mix is probably the very first thing I made, like completely on my own. And surprisingly, it like didn't turn out too bad. So maybe if it had come out like shit, I probably wouldn't have gone down this path. Thankfully, I don't think it came out that bad. So I think that was probably my first dish that I had like ever made without any guidance.
Vishal cooked dal for me when he came to visit me. That
Yeah,
was amazing.
That was my first thing I
but
learned. I mean, I don't really cook that much, but uh, my mom made me like taught me how to like make dal, and so I thought, okay, it's fairly easy. Like I just kind of know what to do. So when I went to Sai's place, I for survival
you
we had to cook.
you
So
For
experimented with that
survival,
one.
oh my
survival.
god.
So
So, so just to add, like the traditions that I was talking about earlier. So like obviously, like my maybe they're not like expert cooks or anything, but like even like all the men in our family like definitely learn how to cook at an early age, because it's like expected of them. So I think like yeah, like traditions always have like their like pros and cons, but like and they're sometimes really difficult to follow. But like this particular tradition, like maybe if the tradition doesn't exist, like men maybe wouldn't have ever taken the responsibility to learn how to cook, especially if we had still like if we're still a part of like now I know like everyone lives on their own, so like you have to learn how to cook, but like in a traditional like Telugu household, like there's usually never a situation where the man has to learn how to cook, so they don't. So yeah, I mean like we taught my brother how to make annam in the pressure cooker when he was like 13, so so I think it was a plus.
Hey, that's also difficult. You can't do like
It is.
close your eyes and pour any
Yeah,
number
it
amount
really.
of water. Like you have to like
That's not even the hard part. The hard part is, did you remember to pour water underneath the annam ginna in the pressure cooker?
Oh, right, right. Yep.
Blow up the whole pressure cooker in one shot.
I have a question actually, now that you talk about the expectation, right? So you were taught at an early age to like start cooking on your own and little to no guidance, right? Eventually. Do you think that from then and now you're doing it because it's expected of you, or did that kind of create a passion for you?
Oh, it definitely created a passion for me. For me, like now, like I don't like we were talking earlier. I don't consider myself very artistic. It's the prop I found for the expression of my art is usually really bad. But they say cooking is one of the like 64 arts. So I guess like it is my like artistic outlet. Like like I really try to bring like express myself through it. So definitely like something I'm really passionate about. Not just like cooking. I like really enjoy like serving and hosting and like and there's like a lot of traditions behind cooking. So like one thing that I find really interesting is that there are videos, like thousands of videos on the internet that teach us, oh, like, etiquette at a fancy dinner. And it's like, what is the small plate used for? What is the big plate used for? How many wine glasses do you need to have? Left side, right side. And like people watch those with so much interest, like it's like some, Brahma Jnanam that everybody needs to know. But like, ask any typical like even Telugu auntie or uncle for that matter. Like where do you serve papu on a vistaraku, and they'll be like, just put it somewhere. Why does it matter? And like, nobody cares to know. Like there's an actual like whole paddati and like or like what there's like different food that's served at different events at like different like like if someone is getting married or if someone who passed away. There's like so much history and so much um, just like a vidhi vidanam paddati, and like a lot of people don't know those things and don't really care for those things. But I feel like, whether we care or not, like, why does it matter if we have two wine glasses or four wine glasses? We still, like, we give importance to that, right? So, like, I feel like whether we know the reason and we don't question why, but like when it comes to like anything Indian, anything, traditional, we're like, oh, why? What's the need? Like, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like it is still important to carry that on to the next generation. So like maybe like 5 generations from now, like if the tradition is carried forward, like maybe someone will find like scientific discovery like one day. Like just yesterday, I was reading like this headline on some page that was like, "Move over meditation, breath work is the way to go." And I was like, "Oh, okay, glad I am. Yeah, you guys figured it out now." So like maybe one day they're gonna be like, "Yeah, I mean, Papu has to be in the middle of the banana leaf for X, Y, and Z reason." And we're not gonna Telugu people are gonna be like, "Wow, really? Like, I gotta do that from tomorrow." It's like, dude, your ancestors have been doing that for like thousand generations now. So that's all right. I talk a lot. Sorry.
No, no, that's good that you talked about that. I don't cook that often to realize this, but like, do you think that cooking is like a stress reliever? Does it actually help with that?
Yeah, I definitely do think that in fact, like when I feel like down, I definitely try to cook something like elaborate or something like difficult. And if hopefully I do it does come out well, I feel really good. But then, off cases sometimes like if I mess up on a dish, I feel really bad. Like I can't sleep that night. Like 2 weeks ago I made tomato pachadi, which I consider like as one of my like, really like I don't know, like expert dishes or whatever the heck. Or like not even expert, but it's like tomato pachadi is like a very traditional, like, like amamma, nanama kind of a, like traditional item, right? And the fact that I've learned how to do that makes me feel really good. But I screwed it up last week or 2 weeks ago, and I was just I couldn't sleep. I was just like, how could I do that? Like, why did I put too much avalu in that? Like, oh my god, this pesky avalu. Like, why did I have to? So it's a stress buster, but sometimes it could be stress giving as well if you're like me.
What do you do in those times when your food that you make is unedible? Do you restart?
So like I try to I try not to waste food to like whatever extent I can. Of course, it's not always possible. Thankfully, I've never had like any massive disasters. Like even with the tomato pachadi, it just came out like I put I think too much avalo and too much mentolo in that. If you know what that is, the some of the spices, right? And it came out really bitter, like really really bitter. But obviously, I used like $10 worth of organic tomatoes. I wasn't gonna throw it out. So I mean, I tried to salvage it by like putting extra sugar, like putting more like tamarind, or putting more salt, and tried to balance it out. And I mean, it tastes fine. It's probably not the very best tomato pachadi in the world, but like if you mix it in with some annam or eat it with some dosa, it doesn't taste that bad. But if it like, so I try my best to salvage it. But if it comes out really really bad, then like obviously it's that I probably won't sleep that night. Toss it and then just try again the next day.
How often did your fire alarms go off in your house?
Okay, so they don't go off in my house
You
because
guys don't have any? Okay.
they don't they don't go off in my I have a really bad habit. I cook everything on like I leave all the stoves on high, and my mom's always on my back. She's like, "Why do you put everything on high? Anni marchagoraputta intlo anni maaripotu." It's really hard to wash them if you put them on high and whatever. But in my house, it's okay because I think there's not maybe a fire alarm and there's more space for it to like if it does burn for the smell to kind of like dissipate. But if I go to my friends' places, like if I cook in their apartments, and if I do the same thing, I like the banali and leave it on high and it gets like really hot. It smells really bad. Like there have been circumstances, like especially every time I cook at my friend's house, like in the past, they'd had to open their balcony doors every time because I just put everything on high and I just leave it. So not in my house, but plenty of times other people's places.
Thank you, Shavya. Shavya, if you were to, sum up our discussion today, like whether it be, you know, migrating to America or going back to India, um, having cooking starting off as a new thing to do, but ended up being a passion. What's a core lesson that you learn and kind of want to put to the world that we can also you know take it upon us?
That's a definitely a deep question. Okay, so one thing I've always like realized every time I would like reflect on this series of events in the past, is learning to accept and adapt to change. Um, and like being open minded to like like to any new experience. So whether that was like moving from, the Bay Area to like India, like that 1 year, the amount of trauma I caused myself, like I can never like undo. Like if I had maybe just been a little bit more open, I wouldn't have certain, like, like I would have maybe had a better experience. Like, yeah, sure, like I slowly learned how to like adapt and move on, like, but it took me a whole year, so like and then after 4 years, like I finally got used to India. My parents were like, "Oh, pack your bags, we're going back to the US." And I was like, "Girl, joking." Like it took me like 3 years to get used to this place, and you guys are taking me back. But that's what I tried. Like I was like, okay, no, I'm not gonna do the same thing that I did when I came here. Like, believe me, I know it sounds like really crazy, but like I was just as upset to come back to the States like I was when I moved to India. It was, I think, change in itself is, really hard, regardless of what it is or where it is too. But the difference was how I handled it. In when we moved to India, I was just blaming my parents, and my whole like attitude was trying to show them that, oh look, like you guys have like certain ideas, and guess what, you guys are fussed up. And like I don't think that was a win-win for anybody. But like when I came to the US, I was like, okay, no more games. Like I'm grown up now. I can't. No, there's no point in like ruining your life, ruining other people's lives, and blaming people. Like no one wins. So just being open-minded, and even for the cooking thing, like there might be like certain like traditions and certain things. Like I was always sort of taught to like accept things, like culturally. So I'm thankful for that, because I guess it gave me an opportunity to like accept the learnings, or like accept the traditions with an open mind. So and now that I'm older, now I can choose. I can make like a decision for myself whether I want to like take something forward or not. Whereas if I was just, like, no, like we live in the US, I'm not gonna do all this crap. Like, this is the 21st century. I'm not gonna do this. Like, I maybe wouldn't have discovered that I enjoy cooking, or whatever. So I think just, first like giving it a chance, like it doesn't hurt to give things a chance. Like I know we always have like certain prejudices and like preconceptions about everything, whether it's a change or whether it's a tradition, because of our like lifestyle. But you know, your like thought process, that it doesn't have to always be right. So probably that.
That was amazing. I was gonna
That was
ask
deep.
you, yeah, I was gonna ask you because not many people can be open-minded about everything, but the way you said giving it a chance, and you're not right all the time.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm not right all
what a
the
great
time
end.
either. It's really sad. I wish I was. But
Sravya, we were really fortunate to have you today. It was amazing. It was fun. It was really good to experience your life through words that you've shared today. And yeah, we really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming on.
thank you so much for having me here, guys. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. You guys are very great hosts. Didn't make me feel awkward at all. Like I know we've never met in person, but it felt very natural. So I
No,
appreciate you guys. So.
yeah, no, thank you. I think someone who's going to be, I mean, people are going to be listening, or, going to feel like, oh, I'm not the only one that went through, uh, cultural change or moving. So I think, and it also you're also out there, so people get to know you better. So really thank you for that. And before we move on to our like quick game, I just want to thank all the listeners once again. So thank you to everyone who supports Telugu Saga. And if you haven't already, please follow Appadam of My Eye.
Thanks, Michelle.
So it's just really cool. So so yeah, we'll hope to be back with a new podcast.